and gentlemen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 149 of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by former co-host Matt Kling.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
So, one of my highlights of GP Portland, by the way, we haven't done a podcast in 2 weeks, was a player that came up to Matt Kling and gave him crap for going on the podcast saying he'll never quit the podcast and then quitting the next week.
Yeah, I mean that was a pretty extreme move on my part. To be fair, it wasn't like for lack of love of the podcast. It was more just I wasn't into Magic at that point in time, and
sure.
It's really hard to talk about Magic when you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and like when you're playing nothing but Diablo and Hearthstone.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I was even playing Hearthstone at the time, but yeah, I was playing a lot of Diablo 3 and StarCraft 2.
Well, we are also joined by RPTQ winner Casey Bloodworth.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. You're on the show every week.
I mean, it's got a special introduction. I guess it deserves a special thanks.
Yeah. By the way, Casey thought this was episode 11, so you can win RPTQs and still not know what episode it is.
It's true. There's just certain things in life that I don't know. Where did we park the car? What episode is this? And yet these are the questions Spencer asks me every day.
I do ask him where we parked the car a lot. Hey, where did we park the car? I don't know that. I didn't know it last time you asked. I don't know it today. It's true. I ask him that a lot. But let's get right into a few things. So don't forget that you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/ccmtg. Our first segment is #always-improving. It's kind of the point of this podcast. And I think that it has never rang truer before this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work we've put in really came through this weekend, like in a big number of ways.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Drew Walton, my co-host on Limited Time Only, Casey Bloodworth, and Michael Hinderocker. He's not here because he was literally in Denver top 4ing the RPTQ.
Literally qualified for the PT like 4 hours ago.
Yeah.
Or less.
All three of my co-hosts all qualified for the Pro Tour this weekend, and I couldn't be prouder. Like, this is an unreal feeling, right? It's like years of work that we've all put in. And, when it was Quentin and then me and then Quentin and then Austin, it was like coming together, right? It was like this feeling of like, man, we're like on a roll. And this weekend just feels even better.
Oh yeah, by so much.
Like we thought that was sweet, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like being qualified for 4 Pro Tours in a row, and now it's like, I mean, we just added Danny Cathro and Patch to the team, to our testing team. Danny is also qualified for this Pro Tour. Quentin has a chance to qualify this coming weekend. You are going to a GP and you're gonna try and qualify Matt. Like, if everything comes up us, like, it would be crazy.
Yeah, that would be unreal.
I mean, already we have.
It's already unreal.
It's already unreal. It's something that we have dreamed about for years, right? Having multiple of our friends qualify for the Pro Tour, being able to like really hammer down in testing, and I'm just so happy and like I'm so proud.
Like it's coming up in a big way. Like we have a 9-person team, or I guess 10 people, and 3 people are qualified for this coming Pro Tour. Like that's a significant percentage.
And I would assume that Drew will test with us also.
Yeah, he's certainly more than welcome. And like, potentially as many as 6
people could be qualified for this Pro Tour that we could test with.
Yeah, and that's a huge improvement of sometimes we had 1.
Well,
right?
I mean, for a long time we always had 1.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, for 2 years running, like it was always 1. Whether it was Alex, Quentin, me, Austin, sometimes actually would help. I remember doing a little bit of testing with Aaron Leet. We would always help the Utah players. Once we came together as a team, yeah, it's been me, Quentin, and Austin, and Alex. He's not on the team, but he's on the team. But
honorable mention.
Yeah, but this is different. And it felt different as it was happening. I got to watch Casey in his entire tournament because he was playing on Moto, and it felt like it was, I mean,
You know, honestly, I felt really bad about it when you were like, "Oh, he's 4-1 right now. He's just in the semis of an old school PTQ." I was like, "Oh man, why do you got to tell me this now? I just got to be sweating it the whole time, and like, if he doesn't make it, I'm gonna like."
Casey didn't know. I was actually texting everyone else during Casey's entire tournament.
For future reference, don't do that. Do it the way Michael did it, and just be like, "Got there." That's all I want to know.
I was texting Michael his entire tournament today.
I mean, for what it's worth, if I qualify for the PT this weekend, I guess you guys will probably be able to see it because it'll be on coverage. But
no, I think, I mean, watching Casey's, and I don't know what it was, but I just had this feeling that it was going to happen the way that it happened.
Yeah. So around, it was a 7-round tournament. So around 5, after winning that one, that's when it started to feel pretty real. I was 4-1. Like, just 2 more. I definitely felt like I had 2 more match wins in me. And, just had to not punt and had to, hit the right matchups and, hit the matchups that I expected to hit. And that continued to hold true, and it really came together.
So you made an audible right before the tournament. What happened? Why don't you talk about that? Because that's got to be your always improving moment this week.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something I normally would not recommend, but I was on a pretty bad skid with Bat Company. I was on a really big hot streak and then went very cold with the deck. And some of it was run bad, some amount of it was bad matchups, but some amount of it was tilt and just playing bad because of those 2 things. But I went on a real cooler with Bat Company. So, 2 hours before the tournament, I text Spencer, hey, come show me how to play ramp. I need a crash course because I'm modeling. And so Spencer wakes up at noon. It comes and
well, we had celebratory champagne for his RPTQ win the day before.
Yeah, so we jammed some matches with ramp. They all go really smoothly. Ended up getting it registered for the RPTQ, and it started off pretty strong. Played against Thermo Alchemist, which we thought maybe a kind of a bad matchup.
No, I think that I thought that it was 50-50. I think that it was when you define a coin flip, that matchup feels like one.
Yeah, and by
that I mean the flip of a coin. Whoever
goes
first,
right.
Interesting. I would assume that it's like most of that deck's matchups, which is just it's directly correlated to how many fevered visions they draw.
Well, because you have 4 main deck,
you have the World Breakers yeah.
and Ulamog. If you play an early Ulamog, they always lose.
Right.
It turned out that also if you played an early any threat, they always lost.
Yeah, that's kind of what worked. They had a really hard time dealing with anything big.
Yeah, it turns out that they're also a deck that can't beat explosive vegetation.
I mean, that certainly makes sense. I mean, if you're going to cast an 8-mana or a 7-mana card on turn 4 or whatever, they're probably going to lose, right? A lot of times they can't keep up with the Sylvan Advocate, so.
Yeah, and that's kind of how that one played out. And then you got real unlucky against Band Company.
Yeah, got browned against Band Company, and I was like, well, I deserve this. This is how my tournament's going to go, and it's my fault for audibling. But then
2-0.
Yeah, then the next one was mono red, and that one.
The next one was black red, right?
Oh right, sure. The next one was black red,
which you 2-0'd promptly.
Yeah, real easy in 5 minutes. And then it was mono red, and he killed me on turn 4.
Oh, you know what? You're right. It was mono red then black red.
Okay.
You are correct.
Yeah, neither here nor there, but
yeah, not super important. Anyway, mono red. So game 1, I lose on turn 4 in game 1, and I was like, oh my god,
yeah, it was real quick because I went to the bathroom and came back, and I was like, oh, your tournament. Oh, it looks like you're gonna win this game. He's like, yeah, it's game 2.
Yeah.
Oh, well, at least you're gonna win this one.
Yeah. Then at game 3, was able to fade a burn spell for a couple of draw steps and get there, and that's kind of when it started to feel like okay, I could breathe again. Then black red was pretty easy. I don't really know what was going on there. Truth be told,
I played against that deck a lot of Moto recently.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's just sort of the new budget aggro deck or what its deal is exactly. But
you know what deck we're talking about?
I actually have no idea what deck you're talking about.
It's the black red Madness burn deck.
Yeah,
okay, so yeah, sure.
Yeah, the Alms of the Vein Thermal Alchemist Fiery Temper deck. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there was definitely points right after the burn deck came out that I wanted to splash for Alms of the Vein, but it might be not possible to play Grixis, so.
Yeah. And well, he was playing just red-black, and I think that's kind of what a lot of people who are trying to play Alms are doing. I suppose it's probably a little bit faster than the blue versions, but has a lot less consistency. But
yeah,
anyway,
it seemed like a buy for you. I've only played against the deck with mono red on Moto because that's what I was playing. on Moto for a little while, but I was beating it with mono red. So
Yeah, it felt awkward to me. I don't really fully understand what you're looking to do with that deck, like why specifically you'd go that route. Then played mono white twice in a row after that, and that was really good. That was actually, we played against that in some of the tune-up matches before the RPTQ.
yeah, I
And
always
that
feel
felt
like I'm
like
gonna
a
jinx
really
it to
good
say that I've
matchup.
literally never lost to that deck, but I've literally never seen my deck list now lose to that deck.
Yeah, it like
Did
intuitively
it feel like a buy?
pretty close, and it's kind of weird because like intuitively I would not assume that was a good matchup, but it sure plays out like a really good matchup.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I'm surprised that it's a good matchup when you don't flashback a Kozilek's Return or play Chandra, which I assume happens in most games.
Yeah.
So I absolutely can see how it could be a good matchup. But I'm surprised that you were able to get the win without casting a 7-drop, which implies you didn't flashback a Kozilek's Return and also didn't play a Chandra.
yeah, it was game one.
Yeah,
and
I won every single game one, and there's no Kozilek's returns in the deck game one.
Oh, powerful. Interesting. I'm actually really surprised to hear that it's that good of a matchup without the Kozilek's Returns.
I think that the matchup is like close to unlose. I think it's the best matchup of any matchup I've played outside of like Cobblade matchups,
Interesting.
Yeah, I would.
What
agree
is it
it's-
that gives you those advantages in that matchup?
because every card in your deck is good against them. Like you're boarding out good cards against them after board.
I mean, do you feel like World Breaker is a good card against them? I mean, it's fine. I
Yes.
mean, it kills the always
Yeah,
watchings.
it's been surprisingly good against them.
Yeah,
I
just
guess
because
it blocks things with Griff Boons.
Yeah,
I can see.
that's a huge part of it. Blocking things with Griff Spoon. Casey
And-
has played the deck. He can.
yeah, it just kind of gums up because the deck doesn't have quite enough reach, right? Because it's a mono white deck, so it can get you down to about 8 or 9, and that's what happens basically every game, and then they just stop being a participant in the game.
Interesting.
That's kind of the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
they can't beat a Chandra or a Dragonlord Atarka.
Yeah, Dragonlord Atarka, and also increasing Dragonlord Atarka to 3 is something that I noticed the GP was very powerful. I've been playing 2 for a long time, always wishing that I could play 3. I've cut down to 3 Chandras so that I could do that. I don't regret the decision, and I'm sure Casey doesn't either.
Yeah, I mean, the Dragonlords were super good.
Dragonlord Atarka being a 3 of in your deck might have actually won you the tournament because you had one in your hand.
Yeah, so in game 2, my opponent cast Infinite of round 7. My opponent cast Infinite Obliteration, and he transgressed me earlier and took a Tireless Tracker, and he saw that I had World Breaker and Dragonlord Atarka, and he tanked for a really long time on the Infinite Obliteration, and then chose Dragonlord Atarka. And then I cast a World Breaker every turn for the rest of the game. And
That'll teach him.
yeah.
Well, he was on Mono Gideon's.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think that generally when you are playing a Gideon deck, like Dragonlord Atarka is usually the card that beats you. Like, in my experience, that's been the case.
Yeah.
That being said, I do think that it's more often correct Infinite Obliteration the World Breaker just because you can never get rid of it. Like,
Well, not only that, but he already had a Sanctum in hand, and he had drawn another Sanctum since he had been
oh, okay,
transgressed.
sure, yeah.
So he basically, I had 2 World Breakers in my hand, effectively.
Right, yeah. No, that makes sense because, yeah, you can't sacrifice the Sanctum to the Dragonlord Atarka.
Right.
Right, and you can't tutor up Dragonlord Atarka with Sanctum. So,
Right.
it was powerful.
How'd you feel about the deck?
It was really good. It's definitely a ramp deck, right? Like sometimes you're just playing off the top, and that's just your life. But when it gels together, which it happened, it gelled together for me a lot. And I probably underrated the deck a little bit just because you do pull so many lands out of your deck. You do draw quite a bit of gas in the late game. But it was really powerful, and I think that like if you are going to play in an RPTQ next weekend or like any standard tournament, I think that it's certainly one that's worth considering. Especially like an RPTQ sized event where you need to go X1 and you can afford about 1 loss.
Which is
over
what the
a medium,
Mulligans,
right?
Mulligans will probably give you about that with the deck.
Right.
That's actually why I played the deck at that big GP. Is I was like, I think that at this size, I'm good for an X2 with this deck.
Yeah, I would think kind of at a bigger tournament, I would be a little bit more gun shy about it. Like GP level, I think that's when you're getting into too many rounds to play ramp, at least for my personal taste. But I think that like a 7 to 8 round tournament is a really nice sweet spot for that deck.
Well, honestly, if we're thinking that, like, you know, you're
That was
good
my
if you're good for a 6-1, then you're good for a 12-2, right? Like,
That was my thought.
Well, I think that you're good for about 5.5 and 1.5. So, you know what I mean? So that's just kind of my feel for it, but I
Sure.
could be wrong.
So I have a question for you about your list specifically because I just got to look at it today. I was curious what the why the Hedron Crawler over Leaf Gilder.
So this is actually something that I've thought about a lot. Actually, I did a deck tech on the deck and talked about how I would play Leaf Gilder instead of Hedron Crawler, but I was lazy and didn't buy a Leaf Gilder before I sent the deck
I
to
see.
So, I mean, after having played it, I'm certainly actually kind of glad it was a Hedron Crawler.
because of them are cool.
Well, no, not so much that. Does that even do anything with it? Is it an
Well,
artifact?
it's an artifact,
Oh,
yes.
interesting. But because I was using it, I activated it to get World Breakers back a couple of times.
So I did think of that interaction. I wasn't sure if that was more powerful than just actually having the... I mean, I guess you never really need double green, though, right? So, like...
You actually, that's something that I had to remind Casey of multiple times while he was playing the deck. I was like, no, you don't ever need double, like, don't worry about the same green.
Yeah. I was explosive vegetationing for like one mountain, one forest a lot. And apparently there's no reason to do that.
No, there's not. Anyway, what was your...
Oh, no, that was really what I was getting at. So I did consider that maybe you just needed the colorless sources for World Breaker.
I think that just a 2-1 body is better still.
Sure.
I actually wish that I could play 2 Leaf Gilders to Hedron Archives in the deck, to be honest with you, because I think that it gives you like your best draws when you can play as many of those spells as possible. The problem is like you don't have room.
Are you concerned about making your ramp spells weak to Liliana?
Yeah, so that's one of the other reasons that it's only 5 ramp creatures. And you also board them out in the Liliana matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume you would, but I'm guessing that matchup is just very good for you game one, so you're
It
not so
is.
worried about it.
It
Like,
is, yeah.
once they board in their transgresses and things that can actually beat you, you got to kind of, like, make sure they're not getting the
You
reckless...
diversify your threats at that
yeah,
point.
you make sure they're not getting the reckless value by being able to kill your ramp spells, too.
Yeah.
So
Well, either way, congratulations, Casey, on your hashtag always improving moment this week.
Thanks.
I'm super happy for you.
yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely, man. Congrats.
I appreciate that, you guys.
So for me, there's a few things that happened. Restructuring of our testing team. Getting rid of some people. Not in like the sense that like we didn't want them, right? Like Manny.
Yeah,
for
certainly
example.
no malice there or anything.
Yeah, I mean, Shaddy Badran is literally top 8 3 GPs last year.
Yeah.
And he's not on the team anymore. And Manny doesn't play Magic. I talked to all of them. I told them like, hey, if you're ever coming back to Magic and have time to like put in testing, you are always welcome. But we also added 2 guys with Patch and Danny, and there's a restructuring of my life that's about to happen with my baby due in 3 months. 3 months and a couple weeks, and there's a lot of things that I need to do. I'm probably going to be more focused on Moto than paper. I've talked about that for a few months now, and that's just what's going to happen. And I don't know. There's so many things that can happen in your life that impact your Magic game, and so I'm trying to mitigate that and really make it so like it's a smoother transition for me than it is for others, because I want to be able to. I want any of you to be able to come to me and ask me my opinion on a deck and be able to give you a good opinion, right? Like, I was very happy that I was able to be there for Casey this weekend in his time of need against Band Company.
Yeah, I certainly was in need that morning.
But either way, I was happy that I like. So actually, I do know how to play like this deck, and I do know how to sideboard, and I can teach you that really quick. And I want, even though I'm probably not going to play in a Pro Tour for a couple years, I mean, if I get lucky, maybe, but like, I want to be the MTG dad of the team, and refocusing my life and like doing that is it's gonna be intense. And I think that in the long run, it'll make me happier, and I hope that I can continue to improve at Magic at the same rate. So, how about you, Matt? Did you improve at Magic this week? I heard you have a Seat Wheat brew.
Yeah, I have an interesting brew for Modern. I would say that my biggest improvement in Magic might be just giving up on my personal pet deck in Modern. I mean, it's not my personal pet deck, but the deck that I love in Modern, which is Absent Company, just because I'm really sketched out about the way the format's shaping up for that. And that's going to be, if I end up not playing Absent Company, it's going to be really hard for me, but it's just, it's kind of somewhere I have to grow out of that in Modern. Been playing Kitchen Finks and Viscera Seers for too long now.
It's been forever, really.
Yeah.
They're all worn out. Can't even
barely even read them anymore. Yeah,
I was gonna say, are all of Oasis games Mr. Sears moderately played at this point? Oh man, what a great! That's the longest hashtag always improving segment we've ever had.
We improved a lot this week.
And we'll obviously get to talk to Michael next weekend. He played Teamer Emerge with pretty close to the 60 that
Michael Majors.
Yeah,
Michael Majors played.
He played the same 60.
And then a different sideboard.
Yeah, a little bit of a different sideboard.
And we'll get to talk to him about that. He was the number 1 seed going into the top 8 and then 1 in 3. So we'll get to talk to him when he comes back from Denver. But let's talk really quick about Power Rankings. So Power Rankings are brought to you by 5 Color Combo. They have a great app for drafting Magic on your iPhone or your Android. Check it out. And also check out their website at 5colorcombo.com. You can find this podcast on that website, as well as mine and Matt's testing videos will be there also. So check it out. Matt also, we can talk about this on the podcast. So Matt and I, it's now an ongoing wager. Whoever wins our weekly testing will get to pick the decks the next week, and the winner has to buy Starbucks. Or the loser does.
Loser buys Starbucks. Yeah, I mean it's not.
Loser buys Starbucks, and also gets to pick the decks going into the next week.
Right. Yeah, so it's a little trade off there. Like, so yeah, you have to buy the Starbucks this week, but at least you get to pick the decks next week. So
With friendly agreement not to like.
Yeah, obviously we're not going to pick matchups where one of them is just going to smash the other one.
I'm going to play Splinter Twin. You're going to play Tron.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just not good testing for anybody, right?
Yeah. So it's exciting stuff, and you can check that out at 5colorcombo.com. Who, like I said, they do sponsor our Power Ranking segment, and also you can check out their classic tokens, which are sweet. I'm going to buy some. But I think that they're that sweet. They're just like so different from other tokens you could be buying.
Yeah, they're very unique. They're eye catching, and like some of it is like really iconic artwork. So if you play a deck that has a lot of tokens, I think that those are a good investment.
The elemental tokens that you can get for your Master of Waves are like really sweet.
Is that the Old Man in the Sea?
I don't remember. It's just a big wave. That's an O1, I think.
Yeah. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I really should have utilized something to that effect before going to the last GP because I spent an arm and a leg getting tokens there. So
yeah, it's a great place to buy your tokens. Check them out, 5colorcombo.com. This week we are doing Standard. We're doing both GPs and the Invitational to talk about the decks that are doing well in Standard. So this includes GP Portland, which we went to. What is the other GP?
GP, some other place that we didn't go to.
It's Remini or something.
And then
like
we
that.
gave 3 points to all of the 7-1 or better decks at the Invitational. Something we don't normally do, but we.
Yeah, it's something we kind of debuted at the Pro Tour. 4 points to the top 8 decks, 3 points to the X1 or better decks, and
we didn't want to give any points to the top 8 decks in this one, but. Or did you?
We did.
We did. Okay.
We both wanted to and did.
All right. Well. Casey's in charge of the power rankings, so I agree with his decision. Coming in, we have a tie with 8 points. We have Black-White Control and Blue-Green Crush. First of all, one of these decks is not like the other because one of them might be good.
Yeah. So,
and by the way, if you're wondering, I think the Blue-Green Crush deck might be good.
Yeah, I am in agreement. I think that the deck looks
which is crazy, right?
The deck looks like nonsense, but like. There's a real chance that deck is actually very good or close to it.
And I think that the Black-White deck doesn't have a good matchup in Standard. In fact, the guy that won the Pro Tour with it did not play to the GP the following weekend. And he also said, I didn't have any good matchups in that top 8.
Yeah, he was like, I expected most people to be off of Bad Company, and I expected whatever decks people were playing would be bad against Black-White. And it was like...
It was a guesstimation.
Yeah. And he was wrong on both counts and still got there.
Yeah,
so.
he openly said, I don't have any good matchups. And I think that Black-White Control might... I mean, you could probably build it in a way to make it be good.
Yeah, so I think that, like, there are cards you could play, but I think that it probably would need to be either an Abzan or an Esper deck.
Yeah, those Abzan Planeswalker decks look real good.
Yeah, I don't think that Black-White Control is a viable deck.
So, that being said, the... Black-White did actually take second place at that GP, right? At GP Portland.
Yeah, that doesn't change the fact that
I understand. I mean, but it just can't be that bad, right? Like it's probably like something like a 45% against the field deck rather than like where you want to be with Jun, like a 53% deck, you know?
Yeah.
It's probably not even that. It's probably a 40% against the field. If I'm being honest, I think
Travis
the deck,
Wu was just like playing out of his mind, or his opponents were just getting very unlucky,
or they expected him to be on
or
nonsense.
some combination of their I
If
mean, sometimes your opponents are on Demonic Pact, Harmless Offering, and
yeah. Well, because
I actually don't know that he played against that deck for what it's worth.
Well, he was playing against. You're playing against Travis Wu. You're not expecting some like generic deck, right? So in the back of your mind, you're always trying to figure out what you need to play around.
That's
and
true.
Then he just plays
sure.
a Gideon and a Linvala, and then you're dead.
Yeah, I'm sure that his opponents were waiting for the Demonic Pact and the Harmless Offering to come out, right?
So what does this green-blue crush deck do? We've already talked about how we don't think the black-white deck is good. Also, if you play the black-white deck, you can tell us like what its good matchups are, how you're building the deck. Please leave a comment. Like, let us know. Like, we are all about hashtag always improving, and if like somebody has things that we haven't seen, we're definitely always open to it. It's our opinion is that the deck isn't great right now. That's the opinion shared with the person that won the Pro Tour with it, but it only takes one person to figure something out, right? Like, whether it's Esper Humans wrathing yourself or like, it only takes one guy.
Yeah, exactly. There could be something there. I just think that the shell, there's just too many weaknesses in it, but it doesn't mean that deck could never be good. I just don't know that now's the right time.
And I'm always open to hearing
for what it's worth, my 2 cents are that the format is just either you're playing a very tempo-oriented deck where you read the bones you're playing against a very tempo-oriented deck where you read the bones and things like that are very bad. Like, Read the Bones and Ruinous Path are definitely not what you want against Bant Company for the most part.
Yeah, Read the Bones says 3 mana lose the game.
Yeah, and your other alternative is decks that just go way over the top, and those aren't great matchups either. So
it can be a little bit rough, but Blue-Green Crush. Matt, what does this deck do?
So the coolest thing that this deck does is plays Oath of Nissa and Crush of Tentacles on turn 6, and that's just, hashtag value.
Yeah, it's a combination deck, and it gets into part the Water Veil chain.
Not a combo deck, but a combination deck.
Combination deck.
Yeah, it's a bit of a combination, you see. So, in Part the Water Veil is a combination with itself.
Yeah, once you have another Part the Water Veil, it's quite good.
Yeah, I mean just the first one too. Like, the kicker is great.
Yeah. If you have 10 mana, ideally, Part the Water Veil is just a really powerful magic card, and you can flip your Nissas pretty easily in the deck. It has a few lines. This is the kind of the classic deck that I would keep as an F&M deck, just because it's good enough to win, but it's also incredibly sweet.
So, and for what it's worth, though, I think that this deck is probably incredibly hard to play. It has a lot of lines to it, especially with things like Den Protector and...
using when you're getting into the late game, using your Den Protectors to loop your Crush of Tentacles, that's a very kind of strange line that doesn't look super intuitive because it costs 11 mana.
Right, yeah. The amount of things that your opponent can do to lock you out of the game once they have 10 or 11 mana with this deck it's impressive.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that it's very... we were actually playing against online, Casey and I, before the tournament, and when they cast Nissa's Pilgrimage and Explosive Vegetation, I was like, is this the Crush deck, or is this Oleandrazi's deck? And I think that people actually merged the two decks, and I think that it's a very powerful merge.
Yeah, I really like the adoption of Explosive Vegetation in the shell because, again, you really do need to get to that 8 to 10 mana threshold with the deck to really make your powerful chains happen.
Also, apparently Sight from Beyond Sight, or Sight Beyond Sight, is a reg in the deck, Casey.
Yeah.
That was not that guy's tech.
Yeah, I read that card 4 times just to make sure that it wasn't really getting me. But I think it's actually really powerful because you can play this on turn 4, then it rebounds on turn 5, and then you cast your Crush.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when you're curving it that way, it's really powerful.
Yeah, that deck's ability to keep the board clear is really impressive. I was actually just pretty fortuitous in the match that I played against it to be playing World Breakers. So every time he was making me pick up my permanents, it wasn't that bad for me.
Right.
I was slowly pulling ahead.
Well, and I mean, you're playing a semi-land destruction deck too, right? So you're probably able to keep them off of the whole 8 to 10 mana chains.
Yeah, exactly. He needed to keep casting his Crushes just to stay alive, and I'm blowing up lands on every pass through on this.
Coming up next, we have Teamer Emerge. And Michael Majors has told us to please stop calling it Teamerge.
He told you specifically that?
He said it on his deck tech.
Okay.
He was like, what's the guy's name? We've actually met him. We actually have like played Magic with him.
Nick Miller?
Yeah, Nick Miller. Thank you. Yeah, Nick was like, yeah, you're playing a to merge deck, and he said you forgot the E. So I was like, oh, okay.
So
I didn't take that to mean that. I did actually watch this deck tech. Although, admittedly, I was like, multitasking a little bit, so I might have missed that. But it sounded more like he was just saying the pun didn't quite make it.
Oh, because
he said specifically he was trying to say we're merging the decks because he was talking about merging Owens and
oh.
I see. So I think that Team Merge is a very silly name, but it's also the kind of deck name that I appreciate. So I'm always going to call it that.
First of all, I want to say that Michael Major's deck looks like what we wanted this deck to look like when we were playtesting for GP Portland.
Yeah, it's certainly getting closer in that direction.
Yeah, this looks like a real deck. Whereas
Owen's
deck
it's still
looked
playing
kind of
Pilgrim's
funny.
Eye and Primal Druid, and now you've added CDC's Faithful to the
I
list.
think
I think
Druid was
Hold on. I think Sidisi's Faithful is the saving grace of this whole deck. That's by far my favorite card in this deck.
Interesting. Why do you think that?
I don't know that it's even good. I just think it's really cool. I really like that card.
Yeah, so
I mean, obviously,
it's not that.
The synergy with Primal Druid is real. Like, you do actually need to get to a certain number of lands, and it can get awkward when you have Elder Deep Fiends and only Primal Druids to emerge. So having that little interaction of being able to ramp yourself into something to where you can cast, like...
I'm very excited to talk to Michael about this deck who just, like, qualified for the Pro Tour with it and see what his thoughts are because... Well, it has red cards and blue cards and green cards. And
for what it's worth, in my experience, in every version of Delirium that I've played so far, which this is like, a semi-Delirium deck, like you're playing Ishkanas and things like that.
three Gather the Packs, you are going to get Delirium.
Well, so the thing is, actually, the hardest thing to get with Delirium, in my experience, has been Creature. So having the CDC's Faithful to just be able to throw a creature into the graveyard is pretty powerful.
I see.
1 mana, put a creature in your graveyard. Maybe bounce your opponent's permanent if you're lucky.
What do you guys think of this deck? I think that this looks like what we were looking for. When I saw this deck list, I was like, oh my gosh, he did it. He did what we all wanted to do, but didn't have time to do for testing for Portland. Because all of us liked this deck in testing for different reasons. And then he just fixed it.
I mean, as far as I know, Michael hasn't lost a match with it because I was talking to him yesterday about it, and he said that he's been winning with it, but was like still unsure whether he was going to play Bant or this deck. But he did, when he said winning with it, he implied that he hadn't lost with it online. And then today, you guys are telling me that he was the first seed going into the top 8.
Yeah, he was X1.
And also won. Oh, he was X1?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, because that's how you end up the first seed, right? Because you can't draw.
Sure. Okay. Well, it depends on the size of the tournament, right? Like a lot of times the Exo2s will actually end up being the first seed.
Yeah, he was X1.
Okay.
But overall, like
nonetheless, yeah, I mean that's still a very impressive record especially for somebody that just picked up the deck. I mean, Michael's a fantastic Magic player, don't get me wrong, but I find it hard to believe that he was playing exactly perfectly after having played the deck for 12 hours or whatever.
Well, I mean, we'd also playtested the Emerge decks quite a bit, and he especially, because he was really high on the Haunted Dead combo. So he's played this archetype quite a bit, just not this deck, necessarily.
I think that the deck actually looks very good. I'm very excited to play with it. It's probably something I'm going to buy on Moto. Just overall excited. Coming up next, we have Jund Delirium and Thermo Burn that are tied with 13 points. Jund Delirium is it just better than Black Green Delirium?
I actually would argue almost the opposite. So I think you're a more powerful deck than the Black-Green deck, but I think you're much more linear, which leads you to lose to a lot more things that you wouldn't if you were a little bit more diversified. I think that with the Jund Delirium deck, you almost can't beat an Infinite Obliteration, whereas the Black-Green deck has real ways to win the game without it.
Interesting. I would think
specifically in the
why
Black
can't you
Green,
beat an Infinite Obliteration?
Because you're very much playing that's an interesting card. Sorry,
yeah, so we
all
just saw
got
Call of
kinda
the Bloodline in Matthew
caught
Tickle's
up on
deck.
Call of the Bloodline. Yeah,
Interesting.
It's probably a misprint, right? He's probably not playing that.
Maybe. I mean, because people are playing all kinds of weird Delirium enablers in that deck. I've seen Collective Brutality, which I think is like a pretty bad card, and Call the Bloodline is not great, but at least does something.
Yeah, that would be an interesting decision on his part. The reason that you're just such a dedicated Emrakul deck with this deck, in the post-board games, the black-green deck becomes very favored because you have actual ways to attack them while like advancing your own game plan with Grimflayer and the Sylvan Advocates. Whereas this deck is basically only playing Ishkana as a speed bump to try to stall the game out to Emrakul.
It's called a bridge spell.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I'm very interested in both. I think that the thing that for Matthew Tiggle's deck, which is the one that I have pulled up, the main deck to the Slaughters is something that we talked about at the GP, and whether that's something that you wanted. I think this deck is a real thing, and I think that So here's the real thing. I think that this has a very good matchup against those Reduke, like those green-red Worldbreaker, Chandra, Emrakul decks, and I think that the black-green deck does not.
That's certainly possible. Although I don't know for certain if that's true or not. It's hard to say. I mean, it really depends on how much of your disruption you draw, right? I mean, I don't think this deck has any more ways to disrupt those ramp decks than Black Green does, and probably less, in fact.
Distended Mindbender
wins the game by itself, though.
Sure, yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, if you actually do find one of your copies of Distended Mindbender, then that actually is big game, and especially in game one.
Yeah. Overall, I like this Gen Delirium deck. I think that it has the exact amount of stuff that it needs. Do I think that... It's funny because we're comparing it to the green-black deck, but they're actually very different decks.
They are. They don't even function on the same axis, really.
But the reason that we're comparing them is because they're both called Delirium. And they both have Ishkana. But at the same time, like... I think that the Jund deck is way, way different, and I'm very interested to see the future of these archetypes next year, even. As a lot of our listeners are probably playing in modern PPTQs. If you're playing in your standard events, like, this could be a deck that you might want to pick up. I think that it's quite good. The other deck that we have 13 points is the Thermo Alchemist Burn deck, which we did a deck tech on Bank Company today, and we talked about how its worst matchup is Bank Company. Matt, how does this deck have 13 points and also have the worst matchup against the best deck in the format?
I think most of your other matchups are close to unlosable, so there's that. I mean, I've played the deck a little bit online, and I have not got paired against Bank Company. I've been very lucky in that facet, but I have my only loss so far has been to the Mirror, because like, let me tell you, the hands that I have had against other decks are unreal bad, and it just doesn't matter. There's almost no amount of not having it that you can have unless you just draw, 15 lands in a row. There are just so many decks right now that can't beat a Fevered Visions ever.
Sure. I think that's the key, right? Is that it's the deck that the blue-red Flyers deck wished it was last season.
Yeah. Right. It has a lot of closing power just because you can't get out from under these things. They're not like their creatures are small, but like they get around blockers. They do their own thing, and they have card advantage. They have burn.
Thing in the Ice, the Storm Chaser Mage. Which ones do you guys think are correct?
I would have to go with Storm Chaser Mage. I mean, I realize that Thing in the Ice does give you an out to your bad matchups. But I think, honestly, if we're deciding to play a deck like this, I think we're just foregoing that and just saying, I'm going to try to hit the matchups that I'm trying to hit, and this is the way I'm going to play it.
So I think that Storm Chaser Mage is the better way to build the deck, but I also, when I came to that conclusion is when I cooled off on this deck quite a bit, because I think that that's not a particularly good card. So, like, if it's, like, the best way
I have very different opinions of good cards than you do.
I agree. Casey and I have had this conversation as well, and I also am actually pretty high on Storm Chaser Mage. Like, that card's legacy playable. It's definitely a good card. Whether it's good in the metagame or not is different, but I do think it functions very similarly to extra Thermo Alchemist.
Yeah, that card's crazy good.
I don't agree, but
yeah, I think, obviously.
I think that when I came to the conclusion that was the way to build the deck, that I was a lot less interested in the deck.
Okay.
And...
interesting.
I think that deck will slowly fall off. I don't think this deck is here to stay.
So, we talked a lot about green white tokens over the last couple months, and something that happened was green white tokens would have the same points or more than the next 3 decks combined. This week, Bant Company has more than all of the other decks combined by a significant margin.
Yeah, like close to twice as many points as all the other decks combined.
I mean, it's like 26, 36.
Yeah, quick math says it's about
52.
10 points away from having twice as many.
Yeah, 15 points or 17 points away from having twice as many, but like still just an absolute demolition of the field.
So, I believe that this is a self-fulfilled prophecy. I actually don't believe that Bant Company is this much better than every other deck. I believed that green-white tokens was that much better. I believe you were mistaken for not playing green-white, unless you had a real reason not to. I don't believe that's true of Bant Company right now. I think that this is a numbers game, and people are like, rotation's only a couple months away. I'm not buying a new deck. This deck's really good.
Yeah, that's kind of... I think that this deck is insanely played, and like it's being played by the best players because they're like... There's very, very little incentive not to play it. Like, there's no deck that's way better than it. And I think people have been waiting to play Bant Company for 2 years now.
That could be true.
Like, no, now is finally the time. There's no rally, no green-white. We're doing it. We're playing Bant Company. You can't stop me.
To give you guys an idea, though, the metagame on MTGO is 37.27% Bant Company. The next deck is UR Thermo Thing at 7.38.
Yeah, I mean that's so they actually only count the
I know it's 4-1 or better.
the 4-1 or better. So yeah, I mean it's not accurately representing how many of them are played.
But I think that it is a numbers thing.
I agree. I do think that's true, but I'm saying you can't actually. That statistic
Does
doesn't
Green Black
help you.
Delirium have a good Bant Company matchup?
It's fine. I actually don't think that any of your matchups with Black Green Delirium are like slam dunks. I think you're like 50-50 against the field.
Does 4-Color Emerge have a good matchup? Yes.
Are we talking about the four color merge deck? I haven't actually explored that matchup enough. My guess would be yes. Although we did actually test a version of Bant Company that LSV proposed, which had the main deck Clash of Wills and the Ojutize command, and no deck that was relying on casting Ishkana was winning in those matchups.
So the 4-Color Merge deck, the reason the matchup is good is because of the interactions that you're able to create with Haunted Dead and Prized Amalgam.
Right, yeah. I mean, getting multiple prized amalgams back, I can see that being very powerful in that matchup.
Yeah, having played a lot of Bant Company, that felt like your worst matchup by a significant margin. Like, that matchup felt genuinely bad, and most of the other ones don't.
Yeah. But yeah, for what it's worth, so the Jund matchup, for what it's worth, the Jund Delirium deck, we tested that prior to the GP versus Bant Company, and Jund Delirium won like 15 games in a row or something crazy like that. Like, the games were not close. Like,
yeah, I think that real talk, I think that this is, we are all on the same page that it's a numbers thing. That's not to say Bant Company isn't the best deck in the format. I actually think Bant Company is the best deck in the format. I'm just saying it's not 87 points to 13 points for the next best deck.
No, I absolutely agree. But yeah, anyway, once the Clash of the Wills were added, it was the matchup swung actually in Bant Company's favor.
Oh, interesting.
Interestingly enough.
I honestly had been beating Jund with Bant Company online even before switching to Clashes, and I'd never lost that particular matchup, so I'm not sure exactly like if the people I was playing against were just worse or if there was something that was going on in that car testing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I wasn't involved in the car testing. I just was told that that's what it was, and I know that Michael said that he had been beating Bant Company with the deck prior, like playing it online or whatever. At any rate, I think that you can build. I think Bant Company's an
they
incredibly
played 15 games in the car?
yeah.
Michael said it was 6.
Was it?
Yeah, it was 6, and then they decided to never test it again.
Yeah, maybe
and just
that's,
kind of discuss strategy for trying to salvage it.
Maybe that's closer to accurate. At any rate, I think that Bant Company can be built in a lot of different ways to attack different metagames. Is what I was getting at.
Yeah, I agree. With all this being said, I think that we all think the Bant Company is the best deck. We don't think it's this good.
Certainly not that good. I do think it's a very difficult deck to play against, though. So.
Oh yeah, you have to know your Bant Company match.
Yeah, and it's really hard. Like if they have 4 mana open, they could have basically anything, which is why it's so hard to play against the deck.
Except for a boat, because Treasure Cruise is not legal.
You basically just have to almost put them on nothing, or play to the card that's gonna you're gonna lose the game to the least.
Yeah, it's really like, and then also like when you're playing Bad Company, you don't know what you have because those top 6 cards could be anything. Like, they could be Reflector Mages and Spell Quellers. They could be 6 lands. It could be 3 Collected Companies, 2 Dromogus commands in a land.
So, with all of this being said, you're playing in you're playing in a tournament to qualify for the Pro Tour tomorrow. Casey, what are you playing and why?
Well, I played in a tournament to qualify for the Pro Tour yesterday, and I played Ram. And that worked out pretty well. So I'd probably run that back.
Matt?
I would play Black-Green Delirium. I don't think any of your matchups are so bad, and I don't want to try to have to predict a metagame that's fairly wide open, in my opinion.
I would play Ramp. I know that deck really well, and I actually think that I would have qualified for Honolulu if I had gotten an ounce of sleep before GP Portland. So, let's move on to the next segment. So next up we have our training grounds. It's brought to you by Oasis Games. You can take them out at oasisgameslc.com. You can get 15% off your first order by using code CCMTG at checkout. And that's a huge chunk of change. We've had a lot of people tell us that they were able to get into Modern because of that. So check them out at oasisgameslc.com. Let them know that we sent you. Use the codes CCMTG and hashtag would that be good. Just use the code would that be good at checkout, and you'll get 4% off of every order. Let's go into the training ground. So this week it's something that we did once way back in the day. We thought we'd bring it back. It's a tips and tricks episode. So we're going to talk about the things that would never make a training grounds on their own, but they're things that you
were really trying to milk it.
Yeah. But they're fun, and let's talk about some of the things that you can be doing in Magic to give yourself a win percentage that also just doesn't take mental energy. A lot of times, Magic players will try and get really cute, and they'll do things that are really mentally taxing to try and gain an edge that is like a 0.005% edge, and it's not worth it. These are little things you can do to give you an edge that take almost no mental energy.
Yeah, and they will help save you mental energy in most cases.
Exactly. So let's start with matching lands. This one's one that I think that people don't quite understand, and this is literally a saving your own mental energy play, because if you actually spend mental energy, you actually don't need to have matching lands. But if you have matching lands, you can save mental energy. What are we talking about here, Matt?
I mean, basically, as long as you're playing all the same lands, it doesn't matter which lands you reveal to anything. There are lots of scenarios, even beyond getting transgressed or anything like that. Like if you
lands in standard.
If you play Fortified Village, revealing a forest, and then you have to try to remember which forest you revealed when you want to play your Fortified Village the next turn. That's just something that you don't need to have to do.
Yeah, if you just play matching lands, then you don't have to spend the mental energy to do that.
Or just little things like across games, right? Like most Bad Company decks only play 1 island. Some of them do play 2, and those are usually indicative of decks that are playing more Jace's main. So if game 1 you play 1 island, game 2 you play a different island, I know something about your deck.
Yeah.
That you just gave me for free.
Yep, I completely agree. It's one of those things it's free for you to do. Basic lands cost no money.
Yeah, they give them away for free at most stores, almost all of the stores, except for one.
In fairness, I think that was only because
there was Oscar
a specific.
Jones?
Was it?
It was Oscar Jones who got charged for those basic.
I didn't even know that was the case, but that's probably another reason. Okay, so there's probably 2 reasons. One is that, and second was because they knew that person needed them really bad, and it was a good opportunity to
make a couple
rob that
bucks.
person.
Get it?
No, I think that this one's real easy. It's a slam dunk. You should be doing it. It was actually funny. I had a deck check, and the judge came up to me afterwards. He goes, I had to check your deck a couple times, and I was like, oh, why? He's like, well, you were playing whiteboarded basics in standard. And
Shame on you.
I didn't know, I knew why you were doing it, but I was really worried that it also gave you an advantage. So I tried to cut your deck a bunch of times. I'm like, I didn't realize that would even be a thing that you would consider. But I played this is actually another tip that I have for people. Playing whiteboarded lands in a deck that fetches a lot of lands, whether it's in a fetch land format or ramp, actually just saves you time, because they're the only whiteboard cards in your deck, so you can easily get them out.
Which is exactly why I play with all white bordered duels in my Legacy deck.
So
So Julian was playing against David? What's the poker pro's name?
Williams.
David Williams.
Yeah,
yes.
David Williams. And David Williams played a whiteboard at Underground C, and looks at Julian and says, "I should have to concede right now." And Julian was really confused because he didn't give a preface to that. And then he played a blackboard one, and he's like, "Yeah, that's much better." And Julian was like, "What?"
Yeah. So that's just classic rich people problems, right?
It was really funny though.
Yeah,
But I think that's a great tip. If you're going to be fetching mono lands out of your deck a lot of the time, and you want to save time off the clock, make a whiteboarder. There's nothing more ridiculous to me than it's disrespectful for the game to play with whiteboarded cards.
No, they just look really bad. So it costs me some amount of peace of mind to play whiteboarded cards.
No,
because I look at my hand and go, ugh.
You are respecting the game if you're trying to save time off of the clock that way, in my opinion.
So
Matt has no opinion on this.
I think
literally shaking his
yeah,
head.
you should just play with whatever lands you like. It doesn't matter.
I think that playing with whiteboarder lands is probably just strictly better if you don't have eyeballs that care about what you're looking at. But if you have any kind of aesthetic preference and you're not a demon, you should never play any whiteboarder cards.
I mean, for what it's worth, if you're playing with full art lands, it's probably not going to be that much harder for you to find them either.
No, it's not. Actually, one thing that I noticed, the next tournament that I played Ramp at, I used not unhinged, but unglued lands, and then they were actually easier for me to find than the whiteboard lands, where I was very surprised. I was like, oh, this is actually
well, yeah, because when you look at a whiteboarder land, you try to mentally block it out because they look so bad.
Anyway, this is great under our next one, which is watching the clock. You should not have unintentional draws the majority of the time. I think I have one unintentional draw in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I have 2 total, and one of them was an insane punt on turn 5 for me, and the other one was just against a really slow person. It does happen.
Yeah,
but
I mean, there's not always something you can do. I mean, that's a drastic overstatement.
No, there's
especially in this format. You should try to play as fast as you possibly can, but I mean, at the same time,
But
this
is there an
format,
excuse to know that I didn't know that there was not that much time left on the clock?
No, certainly not. You should try to play as fast as you can, especially as fast as is appropriate for the matchup, right? If you're playing a slower matchup, you should know that and try to play faster. But at the same time, draws are going to happen. I mean, I know that
they are going to happen.
Alex and I both played black-green at this last tournament, and I know that both of us would have gotten draws at certain points had we not actually 2-0'd our opponents. He said that he actually 2-0'd his opponent in turns.
Okay, so there are matchups that happens, but were you not aware of the clock while that was happening to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it's something that some people take for granted, that they can actually look at that clock.
And also, I think that there's more value to be gained in conceding those games. You really have to. It's a sliding scale, right?
That's something that we actually talked about on the podcast before, right? Is conceding when you have to preserve time.
Right. It's a sliding scale, right? You should figure out okay, I'm probably only 15% to win this matchup, but I'm also only 50% to finish this match if we keep playing this game.
So. Yeah, and basically draws will happen. That's just a fact of Magic. But the players that is time in the round announcement should not come as a shock to you. That's what we're getting at. You should know when you're getting into that range, especially between games. Take a look at the clock, see where you are. Just have an idea. Sometimes it needs to affect your sideboarding. Oh, you know what? I can't actually afford to go this threat light because I need to close out this game quickly.
Yeah, the next thing I want to talk about is in a similar vein. It's actually pace of play. There's 2 things that I want to talk about here. People play too fast on Moto because they're worried about the clock. And people play too slow in paper because they're not watching the clock.
It's very interesting. I actually feel that I play exactly the opposite. I actually play much faster in real life than I do when I'm playing on Moto. I take a lot of time to think about my plays on Moto. I'll sit there and think about it for a minute if I have a
and I think that's the correct way to do it. So you're just doing it right.
Right. Well, and in real life, I play a lot faster because I don't want to use more than my fair share of the time. I feel like we have a joint amount of time, and I want to make sure that I am under my 25 minutes.
You're doing the right things.
Whereas on Moto, I can see my time, I know exactly where it's at, and I'm this is going to be fine. I can take my time and think about this decision.
Matt's doing it right. People will play at an unreasonable speed on Moto to worry about the clock. I myself have done it. And then people will play an unreasonably slow pace because they don't have a clock in paper. first of all, it's not fair that you're doing that, and second of all, it's not even right. Like, it doesn't even make sense. There are also other people that play like blazing fast in paper to like upset their opponent, and it just actually isn't worth it. You should be playing at a reasonable pace of play all of the time. Be aware of the clock, but like play at a reasonable pace. There's no reason for you to be casting spells like throwing them on the table and like it actually gives you zero advantage. People say that it gives you an advantage, like, oh no, I play really fast because then it can put my opponent on tilt. So that's actually just you're trying to win games that you were going to already win. If Casey, there was a podcast where Casey said something where if I don't actually remember what the situation was, but it was
lands in front.
Oh, thank you so much. If my lands in front put you on tilt enough that you're going to lose the match, you were never going to win the match anyway. And that's the same thing with pace of play. If they were going to lose the match because you played quickly, they were going to lose the match anyway. It didn't actually give you an advantage.
Yeah, and like I used to play Magic really, really fast, and not because I was trying to tell people, but like I process information pretty quickly, like not always correctly, but quickly, and I would play very quickly, and I slowed down quite a bit out of courtesy, just because it was bothering people, and I was gaining nothing from doing it.
Yeah,
and it has helped me a little bit because it gives me a chance to like think twice. But
great stream. You should watch the Think Twice stream.
Don't interrupt me. So I think there's just like, as long as you're finishing your matches on time, there's no reason to be like Steve McQueen, like trying to rush through everything, finish your rounds, in time to go to the bar or whatever. Like, you just don't need to do it. You're there to play Magic. Just take it easy, like play carefully. And when you're on Moto, like you don't need to win the match with 13 minutes left. Yeah,
you have 13 more minutes.
I do think there should be a feature on Moto that if you ever fall more than 10 minutes behind your opponent's clock, you should lose automatically. Because that's the most annoying thing in the world when people play that slowly.
First of all, that would definitely just further promote the thing that Spencer was just complaining about people playing unreasonably fast on Moto for no reason, right? Like,
10 minutes is a big buffer. Like, there's no reason.
Maybe. I mean, at that point though, then you end up with
have the same amount of time. Why does it matter?
You end up with these Nyx Police Ram decks that are literally just trying to F6 every turn, and then like your opponent takes longer than 10 minutes to kill you, and they lose, right?
You have the same amount of time, Casey.
Yeah, but like, it's just wasting my life away.
That's not. You have the same amount of time. Your time is not worth more than their time.
No, and realistically,
but they should also value their time.
Even if somebody's like,
but that's their life.
Even if your opponent is double queuing or whatever, most of the times, I mean, I guess they have a lot of leagues.
I actually will say this. I think that they should ban double queuing.
Well, so, like, it depends on how fast you can play. I do think that it's disrespectful to play so slowly when you're double queuing that your opponent can't actually, like, has to wait for you on a regular basis. But, I mean, Luis Scott Vargas double queues all the time, and his opponents are basically never waiting on him.
I think that they should ban double queue. I don't... Luis Scott Vargas can be the exception to the rule, but I think that it's something that they shouldn't allow.
But anyway, what I'm really getting at is most of the time, if you're in an event that matters for anything, you're going to have to wait for the next round to come up anyway, right? So you still end up with the same things that you end up with in real life, where you're still waiting till like the last match is finished.
Yeah, so it's specifically leagues that has caused this particular tilt, because that wouldn't be my life. I could just be playing my next match if it weren't for like Slowpoke over there. So whatever.
Okay. Let's talk about something that you actually put on this list, Casey. No consequence attacks.
Did he spell it like that?
I was gonna say that's not even kind of how you spell consequence.
I actually did not know if that was a word that I didn't know. I swear to God, I googled it because I was like, what does this mean?
I also read it 3 times, and then it wasn't until I said it out loud that I was like, oh. So consequence has about 1/3 that many vowels.
Dude, I don't know. This is what it would autocorrect it to. Why don't you just talk about no consequence attacks?
Okay, so if your opponent is tapped out and can't okay, let's say we're playing the Bat Company Mirror. On my turn 2 on the play, I play Sylvan Advocate, and then I pass. You play a Sylvan Advocate and pass back to me. So you're tapped out. Your only creature in play is Sylvan Advocate. I'm gonna attack you with my Sylvan Advocate because there's no reason not to. You're probably going to block, but you might have to think about it, and people do stop to think about it, and it's just wrong, because if I had the Dramoka's command, I would just kill your guy. I wouldn't let you block. That's stupid. So there's no reason not to block, but it just like that's like real like
You're just
psychological
hemorrhaging value.
warfare, right? Like just start to wear your opponent down, and also like sometimes, especially if they're playing like walls, like 0-4s and 0-3s, condition them to get used to blocking every turn, so that way when you do have the Dromoka's command, like sometimes you need to like if it's an 0-4, you need to fight and put it like after combat.
Yeah, like a Sylvan
if-
Advocate fighting an 0-4 after it's already dealt damage to it.
Exactly. Like if you don't do that, then you just start blocking, you start attacking all of the sudden later in the game, then they're going to be suspicious. But if it's a no consequence attack, your opponent cannot punish you in any way, there's no reason not to.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I know that it's actually funny. It's actually a thing that people don't do enough in Limited. I know this is a constructed podcast, but no consequence attacks happen a lot in Limited, and people just don't do them because they're like worried about who knows what cards that aren't in the format.
Yeah, I mean it's a slippery slope though. You definitely don't want to get blown out on one of these no consequence attacks, right? So make sure that you make sure that you actually make sure that you actually have no consequences to this attack.
Yeah, for sure. Like if your opponent has any amount of mana, it's not a no consequence attack. It's like they could have anything.
In Limited, for sure. Not necessarily. I mean, there are certainly you should know what the combat tricks are in Limited at some point. But that being said, like you do end up in these catch-22 scenarios against certain decks. Like I know that's one of my favorite parts about the Black-Green Delirium deck is that you end up in these scenarios where you end up having to block their creatures, like specifically against like Thermal Alchemist and things like that. Like they basically have to block your Grim Flayers, and then you get to like second main phase the Liliana and just kill it.
Yeah, exactly. And so like if you just leave your Grim Flayer there for an extended period of time, though, you aren't attacking, and then all of a sudden you do attack, they might still have to block, but they're going to be suspicious, and they might they might play something a little bit differently because they know what's happening.
Right.
Rather than killing your Grim Flayer, they might hold up counter magic for your Liliana. Or if you're attacking every turn, like you're more likely to be able to resolve that Liliana, which is very important.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one. We have one that I actually didn't think about differently until this actual weekend at GP Portland. That's dice placing. So for a long time, I've played a lot of Scape Shift. So there's a lot of dice that goes on top of my deck to make sure that I remember my suspend. I'm automatic at it now. I still play, like, I never forget anymore, and I still place that dice on top of my deck.
Because there's no reason not to.
Yeah, and I think that Tom Ross could have massively benefited from dice on top of his deck this weekend, as we watched him punt 3 times on coverage. One of the best Magic players in the world.
Yeah, just like he probably hasn't played a ton of Greater Gargadon in his life and mostly uses it as a discard outlet, but he could have had however big of a creature Greater Gargadon is in that game, and he just like chose not to have it by forgetting that trigger.
Yeah. But there was one that I had never seen before, and that was somebody suggested putting a dice in your graveyard.
For prized amalgams?
No, for Monastery Swiftspear, or not Monastery Swiftspear, Monastery Mentor tokens actually was what it was.
Yeah.
It was actually a great idea, and I never heard of anybody
talk about it before either, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. Can you do that? They're like, obviously. I'm like...
It is obvious in hindsight that you can put a dice on top of your graveyard.
What are they? What's the
advantage is because
like,
they were missing their monk tokens. They kept forgetting to put monk tokens into play.
Oh, so they
so instead of like being able to resolve this spell like by putting it in the graveyard or whatever, they would remember by like putting the monk token in play. The problem there is it doesn't actually work that way, right? Because you have to resolve the spell by like choosing targets and like things of that nature. But
no, I think that it would.
But it's still a visual cue.
Yeah.
That is interesting. That's not one that I've ever forgotten because my whole life kind of revolves around putting monks into play. With Monastery Mentor, I've been waiting for that all day. I'm certainly not going to forget. But I could, like, it's not a bad idea.
No, and I think that, like, just placing dice on top of your decks to remember upkeep triggers in your graveyard or, you know, whatever. Like, there's certainly no reason to die to a pact.
Yeah.
And not have a dice on top of your deck, right?
Yeah, that's embarrassing right there.
So just remember that, you know, you can't place the pact on top of your deck. That's not allowed. But, like, just put a dice on top of your deck. Don't die to a pact of negation.
Yeah, what's funny, there was a guy who was playing Amulet back, like, when that deck was pretty new, and he had, like, a glass hemisphere or a plastic hemisphere he'd put over his deck because when he was using dice, like, he would just forget and like draw the card out.
Yeah,
which you're not actually allowed to do, and he like got busted for it at a GP or whatever. Because it can't, whatever you put over your deck can't be bigger than a magic card.
Right.
Yeah. I got in an argument against a guy. I was also playing against an Amulet player who was putting this huge thing on top of his deck. It might have been his deck box. And I was like, you can't do that. So yeah, I can. Like, people put dice on top of their deck all the time. I'm like, yeah, that's not the same thing.
But definitely having something to remind you is very important. There's just no reason not to. Like, there's no reason to spend mental energy, right? Like,
Yeah.
Even if you are good and remember your pacts, there's no reason to like force yourself to like be double sure of something. Just put a dice on as part of resolving your pact, and don't forget to pay your pacts.
So as long as we're on tips and tricks that won't make an actual training grounds, I got a good one here. So if your opponent has dice on top of their deck and you happen to be playing
Glimpse the Unthinkables.
no, what's the one that mills with landfall?
Hedron Crab.
Yeah, if you happen to be playing Hedron Crab, you can try to Hedron Crab to make them remove that dice off the top of their deck, and hopefully they forget for the packs. It's worked out for people in the past.
Yeah, it's worked out for person before. And, I mean, it's just not a super relevant interaction.
Yeah,
it doesn't come up often.
Not something that's going to come up often, but you got to look for those little edges where you can get them.
Exactly. And if your opponent does forget to put the dice on top of their deck, don't be so greedy that you feel like you need to mill them again after that, because then they might remember.
I think he actually did, though. I think he did mill him when he didn't have the dice on top of the deck, and he still forgot it.
Yeah, well, he milled them, and then he put the dice on and then still forgot, which is funny. But, I mean, it's just little things like... Magic is a game of psychological warfare, right? Like, in some ways. Like, so, gaining little edges that aren't... I don't feel like this is like a gray area at all. There's nothing dishonest about this. It's just like trying to make your opponent spend mental energy.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
It's about like minimizing your investment and maximizing theirs.
Right.
Next is utilizing the judge, which just means if you don't know what a card does, ask somebody, specifically not your opponent, anybody but them, basically. Ideally, the judge of the tournament, because they can explain it to you. You can walk away from the table. The opponent, isn't going to steal your stuff because you'll know it was them. And you can talk to the judge about any questions you have about the way cards interact.
Not only that, but like, people think that it's like rude to call a judge. That's not even true.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't know exactly how something works, why in the world would I talk to my opponent about it? I'm going to call a judge, ask them how something works. It's not rude to my opponent. People think that there's this stigma that if you're calling a judge, your opponent did something wrong.
Yeah, that you're tattling.
Yeah, that's just not true. My opponent could do something and I'd be like, oh man, I wonder if I can do this in response to that. I'm going to call a judge. And so often your opponent's like, what did I do wrong? And you're like, nothing?
Yeah.
You didn't do anything wrong. I'm just utilizing a tool that's available to me.
Right. And like if your opponent on their upkeep plays a Snapcaster Mage to target a sorcery in their graveyard before they untap, like call a judge because they can't do that and they probably just didn't know.
Thanks, Casey.
But also, like, a lesson I learned, don't be afraid to appeal a judge decision either. Like, at GP Portland, I got, like, a pretty ridiculously bad judge call. And I just, like, let it bother me and didn't appeal it. When I should have appealed it. I did not make good use of this tip.
Yep. Next up, we have resolving mulligans. So, I've had so many people arguing with me about this. You can resolve mulligans before the clock starts. The clock is the play time.
Yeah, you just can and should, for what it's worth. Like,
it's
that's
like
absolutely
just
something.
A waste of time not to.
Yeah, that's absolutely something that will cut into your. That's one of the best things you can do to prevent draws is actually resolving mulligans prior to the clock starting.
Yeah,
because it's just free, right? Like if you guys are both there, just staring at each other, chatting it up, like.
Yeah, I really don't need to know about your mother's birthday from 3 weeks ago. I'd rather be resolving mulligans.
Well, that's all well and good. I don't mind the small talk. Like that's fine. We can chit chat, but I mean, just let's resolve mulligans at the same time at least.
Yeah, multitask.
Yeah,
2-for-1s. Overall, I think that these are just things that are so easy that you should just be doing them, and they just actually take zero mental energy. And they also most of, if not all of them, save you mental energy.
Yeah, and it's kind of what we were talking about when you were filling up your water is like just getting your a little bit of advantages.
But no, I think that like this is just easy, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. Is like just making it as easy on you and as hard on your opponent as possible.
Thank you so much for listening this week, everybody. Don't forget that you can check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/ccmtg. You can check out our sponsors at 5colorcombo.com and oasisccg.com, oasisgamesllc.com, and mtgoasis.com. The next Patreon goal is at $600 per month. We will upgrade equipment again, and I think it will be a huge upgrade. I think it'll be helpful for us, for you guys. I mean, as much as I love doing testing videos with Matt, it'd be sweet to have like a really sweet camera where you guys can really see what's going on. Same thing with the video blog, things like that. Casey wants a fancy mic stand.
That's true. And I mean, I'm not buying it, so.
But yeah, that's the next Patreon goal. Where can people find you guys?
Well, I know where they can find Oasis Games. I mean, if that place gets any more domain names, they can almost just roll their face on the keyboard, right, and find it.
That's true. But where can they find you if they like wanted to talk to you, Matt?
No, if you want to find me, you can.
I thought you were just gonna say no.
No, you can find me on Twitter. That's usually the best way to reach me. That's at the Witch Kling. You can also reach me on Facebook. It's just Matthew Kling.
Or in the Facebook group.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you want to reach out to me personally in the group, I do respond to things on the constructive criticism group occasionally. So, I mean, if I happen to be looking that day, maybe I'll.
Yeah, or just tag him.
Yeah, I mean, if you tag me in it, I will definitely respond.
So. Casey, where can people find you other than at the Pro Tour?
On Twitter at CC Bloodthirst, or on Facebook Casey Tuna Bloodworth.
You can find me on Twitter at Spencer39H, Facebook Spencer Stephen Hallen, MTGO Spencer39Dev, where you can also message me or Quentin at Earthstripes. It's URTHSTYRPE to join the MTGO clan, and either one of us would be happy to add you. And yeah, I mean, you can watch videos with me and Matt every week, where we test whatever format we decide and get some games in. You can also watch my video blog. Every so often. Deck Techs with Michael Hinderocker. This week I actually did a Deck Tech with Casey on Bad Company. Lots of content for you guys to view. You can also check out our other podcast at Limited Time Only with Drew Walden, who also qualified for the Pro Tour this weekend.
And there's like a 30% chance he'll even go to it.
That's true. But thank you everybody for listening so much. Also, we didn't get to do a podcast last week, but I had so many people come up to me in Portland. It was crazy. And I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody who came up to me in Portland. I literally had somebody tell me that, like, I had multiple people actually tell me that we had the best Magic podcast. And it's something that I would have dreamed of years ago when I started this, that anyone would think that. And we've worked hard to improve, and it was humbling to have people come up to me and talk to me, and humbling to be recognized. And I just appreciate everything that our listeners do. We only do this because of you guys, and I really, really appreciate it. And this always improving mindset has changed, I think, our lives. Especially, I mean, we've seen real results this weekend, and I hope that it continues, and that we can I hope that one day we can be a name brand in Magic. And I just shout out to Michael and Drew and Casey, and yeah, it's something that I could have only dreamed of, that something like this would happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It's just awesome to get that kind of feedback, to see people that are familiar with us and are excited about it, getting like in person or on Facebook or on Twitter, like people just giving good feedback that they love the show is basically the only reason I do it. So,
all right. Thank you everybody for listening. And don't forget to check out my video with Matt Kling this week on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And you can also find the podcast on Twitter at CCMTG. And every week on mtgcast.com, constructivecriticism.com, and 5colorcombo.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys all next week.
Everybody knows I've got magic. magic, magic, magic.